The crack of the whip echoed across the dusty town square of Brownsville, Texas, as Katherine Ainsworth crumpled to her knees, the back of her once pristine blue cotton dress now stained with crimson. The year was 1875, and in this corner of the West, a woman's voice was expected to remain as soft as prairie whispers, especially when it came to matters of politics and justice. "Let this be a lesson," Mayor Hargrove bellowed, his jowls quivering beneath his meticulously groomed mustache. "This is what happens to those who spread lies about respectable businessmen in our community." Katherine raised her head despite the searing pain coursing through her body. Her golden brown hair had come loose from its pins, falling in tangled waves around her dirt-streaked face. At 24, she had already endured more than most women twice her age, but nothing had prepared her for public humiliation at the hands of Brownsville's most powerful men. "They aren't lies," she managed, her voice barely audible through cracked lips. "The ledgers don't lie." Another crack silenced her as Sheriff Dawson delivered another lash. 5 in total her punishment for publishing an article in the small local newspaper exposing how Mayor Hargrove and his associates had been embezzling funds meant for the new schoolhouse. Katherine had worked as a bookkeeper at the mayor's office for nearly a year, quietly documenting the discrepancies until she had irrefutable proof. What she hadn't anticipated was how quickly the town would turn against her. Women weren't supposed to understand numbers, weren't supposed to question authority, and certainly weren't supposed to publish their findings. The newspaper's editor, an elderly man who had believed in her evidence, had been run out of town 2 days earlier. The crowd that had gathered to witness her punishment began to disperse, most averting their eyes, a few muttering disapproving comments about women knowing their place. No one offered assistance as Katherine struggled to her feet, leaning against the wooden post where they had bound her wrists moments before. "You have until sundown to collect your things and leave Brownsville," Sheriff Dawson announced, coiling his whip with practiced precision. "If you're seen in this town after dark, I'll have you arrested for vagrancy." Katherine nodded weakly, knowing there was no point in arguing. Her lodgings at the Widow Morgan's boarding house had already been cleared out, her few possessions tossed into the street earlier that morning. All that remained was her father's old leather satchel containing the incriminating ledgers, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the newspaper office. Clutching her torn dress to her body, Katherine made her way toward the newspaper office. Each step sent waves of agony through her back, but she refused to collapse. Not here, not where they could see her break. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she limped past storefronts where shopkeepers quickly pulled down their shades. These were the same people who had smiled at her only days before, who had accepted her help with their accounts, who had praised her intelligence as quite remarkable for a woman. The newspaper office stood dark and abandoned at the edge of town, its windows already boarded up. Katherine slipped around to the back entrance, relieved to find it unlocked. Inside, dust particles danced in the shafts of sunlight that filtered through the cracks in the wooden boards. The printing press stood silent, and scattered papers littered the floor, evidence of the hasty departure of Mr. Hollister, the editor who had been her only ally. Kneeling painfully, Katherine pried up the loose floorboard beneath the editor's desk and retrieved her satchel. Inside were the ledgers, her father's pocket watch, a small bag containing her life savings of $23, and a well-worn copy of Principles of Modern Accounting, the book her father had used to teach her mathematics and bookkeeping before his death 3 years prior. After changing into her only other dress, a simple brown cotton garment that she kept for laundry days, Katherine wrapped her wounds as best she could with strips torn from her ruined blue dress. The pain was excruciating, but she had no time to properly tend to her injuries. Sundown was approaching, and she needed to be far from Brownsville before darkness fell. With her satchel slung carefully over one shoulder to avoid aggravating her wounds, Katherine slipped out of town along the dusty road heading west. She had no clear destination in mind, only the knowledge that she could not return east to her hometown of Dallas, where her mother and stepfather had made it clear she was unwelcome after refusing to marry the man they had chosen for her. The Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the vast landscape in hues of orange and gold. Katherine walked until the buildings of Brownsville disappeared behind her, until the pain in her back became too intense to ignore, until her legs trembled with exhaustion. Only then did she allow herself to collapse beneath the spreading branches of an old oak tree beside the road. As the last rays of sunlight faded, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction she had come. Panic surged through her had the sheriff changed his mind. Was he coming to arrest her after all? With no strength left to run, Katherine pressed herself against the trunk of the tree, praying the gathering darkness would conceal her from whoever was approaching. The rider slowed his horse as he neared the tree. In the dim light, Katherine could make out the silhouette of a man atop a tall stallion, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. "Miss." His voice was unexpectedly gentle with a slight drawl that suggested he wasn't from Brownsville. "Are you all right?" Katherine remained silent, weighing her options. Her experience had taught her that men's kindness often came with expectations she was unwilling to meet. The stranger dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. "I saw what happened in town today," he said, his voice still soft. "I don't mean to frighten you, but you shouldn't be out here alone after dark. There are coyotes, not to mention less savory characters than myself who use this road." "I'm fine," Katherine replied, trying to inject strength into her voice despite her condition. "Please continue on your way." Instead, the man crouched down, allowing her to see his face in the fading light. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with kind eyes set in a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. His brown hair curled slightly at the collar of his denim shirt, and a neatly trimmed beard covered his jaw. "My name is Lucas Lambert," he said. "I have a small ranch about 5 miles west of here. My sister lives there too. You'd be welcome to rest there tonight, get those wounds tended to properly." Katherine tensed. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Lucas removed his hat, holding it against his chest in a gesture of respect. "I know enough. I know you spoke the truth about Hargrove and his cronies. I know they've been stealing from honest folk for years. And I know no one deserves what they did to you today, especially not for telling the truth." There was something in his steady gaze that made Katherine want to trust him, but years of disappointment had taught her caution. "Your sister," she said finally. "She's really there," Lucas nodded. "Lily's 27, never married, tough as nails and twice as sharp. She's been wanting female company for ages, drives her crazy being stuck with just me and the ranch hands." A smile softened his features. "She'd skin me alive if I left an injured woman out here alone." Katherine considered her options. Night was falling rapidly, and with it came the very real dangers Lucas had mentioned. Her wounds needed attention, and she had nowhere else to go. "All right," she conceded finally, "but just for tonight." Relief visibly washed over Lucas's face. "Thank you for trusting me," he said, as though she were doing him a favor rather than the other way around. He offered his hand to help her up, then frowned when he noticed how she winced at the movement. "Your back, it's worse than I thought, isn't it?" Katherine nodded reluctantly. The sheriff was thorough. A flash of anger darkened Lucas's expression, but his voice remained gentle. "I'll help you onto Sampson here. He's steady as they come." With careful movements, Lucas assisted Katherine onto his horse, arranging her side saddle to minimize pressure on her wounds. He gathered her satchel and secured it to the saddle before taking the reins and leading the horse on foot. "You don't have to walk," Katherine protested. "I can ride behind you." Lucas shook his head. "The jolting would just hurt your back more. Besides, it's not far." They traveled in silence for a time, the only sounds the rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the night creatures beginning their evening chorus. The stars emerged one by one above them, brilliant in the clear Texas sky. "May I know your name?" Lucas asked eventually, his voice barely disturbing the quiet. "Katherine," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Katherine Ainsworth, Miss Ainsworth," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "What will you do after tonight?" The question hung in the air between them. Katherine had been so focused on escaping Brownsville that she hadn't thought beyond survival. "I don't know," she admitted. "Find work somewhere, I suppose. I'm good with numbers. I could be a bookkeeper in another town." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "There's a growing settlement called New Hope about 20 miles west. They're building up fast, might need someone with your skills." Before Katherine could respond, a cluster of lights appeared in the distance. As they drew closer, she could make out a modest but well-maintained ranch house, a large barn, and several smaller outbuildings. A warm glow emanated from the windows of the main house, and smoke curled from its chimney into the night sky. "Lambert Ranch," Lucas announced with unmistakable pride in his voice. "Nothing fancy, but it's home." As they approached, the front door of the house swung open and a woman's silhouette appeared against the light. "Lucas Lambert, where in tarnation have you been?" The woman called out, her voice carrying across the yard. "Supper's been ready for an hour." "Got delayed in town, Lily," Lucas called back, "and I've brought a guest who needs our help." Lily Lambert stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She was tall and slender, with the same brown hair as her brother, though hers was pulled back in a practical braid. As Lucas helped Katherine dismount, Lily hurried down the steps. "Good heavens," she exclaimed, taking in Katherine's condition. "What happened to you, poor thing?" Before Katherine could answer, Lucas spoke quietly. "She's the one who exposed Hargrove's embezzlement. They whipped her in the town square this afternoon." Lily's expression hardened. "Those spineless, small-minded," she cut herself off, taking a deep breath. "Well, you're safe now. Come inside, let's get you taken care of." Katherine found herself guided into a warm kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and beef stew. The room was simply furnished but spotlessly clean, with cheerful yellow curtains at the windows and a braided rug on the wooden floor. "Lucas, fetch my medicine box and heat some water," Lily instructed, helping Katherine to a chair. "And pour the lady some whiskey. For medicinal purposes," she added with a wink that somehow made Katherine feel more at ease than she had in days. While Lucas busied himself with his sister's instructions, Lily set a bowl of stew and a chunk of bread in front of Katherine. "Eat what you can, dear. Food helps healing." Katherine managed a few bites, surprised by her own hunger. The stew was flavorful and hearty, clearly made by someone who took pride in their cooking. When Lucas returned with the requested items, Lily turned to Katherine with gentle authority. "Now I'll need to see those wounds. Lucas, make yourself scarce." Lucas nodded, retreating to another room without argument. Lily helped Katherine remove the upper portion of her dress, wincing at the sight of the hastily applied bandages now stuck to the wounds with dried blood. "I'll need to soak these off," she explained, dipping a cloth in the warm water Lucas had brought. "It's going to hurt, I'm afraid." Katherine gripped the edge of the table as Lily worked, using the whiskey both internally and externally to dull the pain. Despite her best efforts, tears slid silently down her cheeks. "You're doing wonderfully," Lily encouraged, her capable hands moving with surprising gentleness. "Whoever did this should be horsewhipped themselves. 5 lashes for telling the truth, it's barbaric. How did you know it was 5? Katherine asked through gritted teeth. Lily's hands paused momentarily. "Lucas counted," she said quietly. "He was in town delivering a calf for the blacksmith's milk cow when they dragged you to the square. Said he tried to intervene but was held back by the sheriff's deputies." This information surprised Katherine. "He didn't mention that." "My brother doesn't boast about doing what's right," Lily replied, resuming her work. "He followed you when you left town, worried about where you'd go in your condition." After cleaning the wounds, Lily applied a salve that smelled strongly of herbs and honey. "My own recipe," she explained. "Learned it from a Comanche woman who saved my life when I was a girl. It'll help with the healing and keep infection at bay." By the time Lily had finished applying fresh bandages and helped Katherine into one of her own clean nightgowns, exhaustion had overtaken the injured woman. Lily led her to a small but comfortable bedroom off the main hallway. "Rest now," she said, turning down the lamp. "We can talk more in the morning." Katherine sank gratefully onto the soft mattress, the combination of whiskey, food, and care making her eyelids heavy. "Thank you," she murmured. "I don't know how I'll repay you." Lily's laugh was warm and genuine. "Having another woman around this place is payment enough. Now sleep." For the first time since discovering the discrepancies in Mayor Hargrove's ledgers, Katherine felt safe enough to truly rest. As sleep claimed her, her last thought was of Lucas Lambert's gentle voice and the unexpected kindness of strangers. Morning arrived with the crowing of a rooster and the tantalizing smell of coffee and bacon. Katherine woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous day came flooding back, along with the pain in her back, though it seemed somewhat dulled compared to before. A soft knock at the door preceded Lily's entrance, carrying a tray laden with breakfast and a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might prefer to eat in bed this morning," she said cheerfully. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I expected," Katherine admitted, carefully pushing herself up to a sitting position. "Your salve must be miraculous." Lily set the tray across Katherine's lap. "It works wonders, but you'll still need to take it easy for a few days. Those wounds need time to heal properly." Katherine's heart sank. "I can't impose on you for that long. I should be moving on today." "Nonsense," Lily replied firmly. "Where would you go?" "Besides, Lucas already rode out at dawn to New Hope to inquire about work for you there. Until then, you're staying right here where I can keep an eye on your recovery." The breakfast was delicious crisp bacon, fluffy scrambled eggs, and biscuits still warm from the oven. Katherine hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite, and soon she had cleaned her plate. "You have a beautiful home," she commented, sipping her coffee. "Have you and your brother lived here long?" Lily settled into a chair near the bed. "Our parents started this ranch when we were children. They both passed 5 years ago. Influenza took them within a week of each other. Lucas and I have kept it going since then. It's not the biggest spread in Texas, but it's profitable enough." "No husband?" Katherine asked, then immediately felt intrusive. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." Lily waved away the apology. "Had a fiancé once. He decided ranching wasn't profitable enough and took off for the gold fields in California. Never heard from him again." She shrugged. "Probably for the best." "I value my independence too much to be saddled with a man who can't appreciate a woman with opinions." Katherine smiled at that. "I understand completely." After breakfast, with Lily's assistance, Katherine managed to dress in a borrowed skirt and blouse. The clothes were slightly too long, as Lily stood several inches taller, but clean garments felt like a luxury after the previous day's ordeal. Lily helped Katherine out to the front porch, where a comfortable rocking chair awaited, positioned to catch the morning sun while remaining sheltered from the wind. From this vantage point, Katherine could observe the activities of the ranch, 2 men mending a fence in the distance, chickens pecking in the yard, and a younger man exercising a spirited bay horse in a corral nearby. "That's Tomas working with the new mayor," Lily explained, noticing Katherine's interest. "He has a way with the difficult ones. Lucas hired him last year after his family's farm failed during the drought." The day passed peacefully, with Lily dividing her time between household chores and keeping Katherine company. By mid-afternoon, Katherine had learned that the Lambert Ranch raised primarily cattle but also kept horses, chickens, and a small vegetable garden. 3 ranch hands lived in a bunkhouse behind the main barn. Tomas, an older man called Hank, and a middle-aged widower named George. "It's not an easy life," Lily admitted, "but it's a good one. There's something satisfying about building something with your own hands, watching it grow year after year." As the sun began its westward descent, the sound of hoofbeats announced Lucas's return. He dismounted in the yard, removing his hat and wiping his brow before approaching the porch. Katherine felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at the sight of him, his tall figure outlined against the afternoon sky. "Ladies," he greeted them with a warm smile. "Miss Ainsworth, it's good to see you up and about. How are you feeling?" "Much improved, thanks to your sister's care," Katherine replied. "And please call me Katherine." Lucas nodded, his eyes lingering on her face for a moment before he turned to Lily. "Is there coffee? I've ridden half the day and could use something before I share my news." Lily disappeared inside, returning moments later with a steaming cup which Lucas accepted gratefully. He settled onto the porch steps, turning so he could face Katherine. "I spoke with several businessmen in New Hope," he began. "The town's growing fast new bank just opened last month. The manager, Mr. Reynolds, was quite interested when I mentioned your bookkeeping skills." Katherine leaned forward eagerly. "He would consider hiring a woman." "He did better than consider it," Lucas replied, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "He offered you a position on the spot, contingent on a brief interview. Seems his last bookkeeper left without notice and he's been struggling to keep up with the accounts." Relief washed over Katherine. "That's wonderful news." "There's more," Lucas continued. "I explained your situation, hope you don't mind, and a widow named Mrs. Chen has a room for rent above her dressmaking shop. It's small but clean, and the location is ideal, just down the street from the bank." Tears pricked at Katherine's eyes. After everything that had happened, this unexpected kindness felt almost overwhelming. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Lucas looked down at his coffee cup, turning it slowly in his hands. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, "and because I admire your courage." Not many would have stood up to Hargrove and his cronies, knowing the consequences. "When does Mr. Reynolds want to meet me?" Katherine asked, already calculating how quickly she could travel to New Hope. "I told him you'd need at least a week to recover," Lucas replied firmly. "He agreed to hold the position. Said anyone who'd risk a public whipping to expose corruption was someone he wanted working for him." Lily, who had been listening quietly, nodded her approval. "That settles it then. You'll stay here until those wounds are properly healed, then Lucas will take you to New Hope." Katherine wanted to protest further, to insist she'd already imposed too much, but the genuine warmth in both siblings' expressions silenced her objections. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay such kindness." "Live well and keep speaking the truth," Lucas replied, his voice soft but firm. "That'll be repayment enough." The following days fell into a gentle rhythm. Each morning, Lily would change Katherine's bandages, pleased with how well the wounds were healing. During the day, Katherine would sit on the porch or, as her strength returned, take short walks around the yard, always careful to stay in the shade to protect her fair skin from the harsh Texas sun. Lucas was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each day to check on Katherine's progress. He brought her wildflowers he'd found while checking the herd, or interesting stones polished smooth by the creek that ran through the property. These small gestures touched Katherine deeply, all the more because they were offered without expectation. On the fourth evening, Katherine joined Lucas and Lily for supper at the kitchen table for the first time. The ranch hands had their meals in the bunkhouse, so it was just the three of them enjoying Lily's beef stew and fresh baked bread. "Tell me about New Hope," Katherine asked as they ate. "What kind of place is it?" Lucas considered the question thoughtfully. "Newer than Brownsville, more progressive in some ways. It was founded after the war by a mix of folks, some Northerners, some Southerners looking for a fresh start. They've built a school, a church, and the bank, of course. A doctor settled their last-year young fellow from back east. And there's talk of the railroad putting in a station within the next few years." "It sounds promising," Katherine remarked. "It's not without its troubles," Lucas cautioned. "There's been some tension with a few ranchers north of town who think they own the water rights to everything that flows through the county. But overall, it's a community that values hard work and fair dealing." As they continued talking, Katherine found herself repeatedly drawn to Lucas's hands, strong and capable, with calluses that spoke of honest labor, yet gentle when he passed the bread or refilled her water glass. There was something about his quiet strength that made her feel secure in a way she hadn't experienced since her father's death. After supper, while Lily dealt with the dishes, Lucas invited Katherine to join him on the porch to watch the sunset. The western sky was ablaze with brilliant oranges and pinks fading to deep purple on the horizon. "It's beautiful," Katherine breathed, leaning against the porch railing. "One of the reasons I could never leave this place," Lucas agreed, standing beside her. "No matter how hard the day has been, the sunset makes it worthwhile." They stood in companionable silence for a time, watching as the colors deepened and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "May I ask you something personal?" Lucas said finally, his voice low. Katherine tensed slightly but nodded. "What made you decide to expose Hargrove's theft? You must have known the risks." Katherine considered her answer carefully. "My father was an accountant in Dallas. He taught me that numbers tell stories, true stories that can't be altered by fancy words or intimidation. When I found those discrepancies, I kept thinking of the children who would have no school because of one man's greed." She paused, remembering. "My father always said that truth matters more than comfort. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror if I'd stayed silent." Lucas nodded slowly. "Your father sounds like a wise man. You honor him with your courage." "What about your parents?" Katherine asked. "Lily mentioned they built this ranch." A fond smile crossed Lucas's face. "My father was a dreamer with calloused hands, came from Tennessee with nothing but determination and my mother's unwavering faith in him. They worked side by side building this place. Ma could rope a steer as well as any man and still have dinner on the table by sundown." His expression grew more somber. "They taught us that character is revealed in how you treat those who can do nothing for you in return." As darkness fell around them, the conversation flowed easily between topics, books they had read, places they hoped to visit someday, childhood memories both sweet and bittersweet. Katherine found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn to Lucas's quiet humor and thoughtful observations. When the evening chill finally drove them inside, Lucas paused at Katherine's bedroom door. "I've enjoyed talking with you tonight," he said, his voice gentle in the lamplight. "Rest well, Katherine." As she prepared for bed, Katherine realized with a start that she was beginning to dread the day she would leave for New Hope. The thought was unsettling. She had always prided herself on her independence, on needing no one. Yet something about Lucas Lambert's steady presence had begun to breach the careful walls she had built around her heart. Over the next few days, Katherine's strength continued to improve. By the end of the week, she was able to help Lily with light household tasks, eager to contribute something in return for the siblings' hospitality. She discovered that Lily had a passion for botanical drawings and was compiling a book of local plants and their medicinal uses. "This is remarkable work," Katherine commented, examining the detailed illustrations. "Have you considered publishing it?" Lily laughed, though there was a wistful note to it. "Who would publish a ranch woman's scribblings? Besides, when would I have time to pursue such things?" "The same could be said of a woman becoming a bank's bookkeeper," Katherine pointed out. "Yet here I am, about to do just that. Times are changing, Lily." The women's friendship deepened through these conversations, finding common ground in their desire for lives defined by more than society's narrow expectations for their gender. Meanwhile, Katherine found herself seeking out Lucas's company whenever possible. She would bring him coffee while he worked on mending tack in the barn, or join him for evening walks around the property as he checked that all was secure for the night. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never made her feel indebted, yet his eyes followed her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. 9 days after arriving at the Lambert Ranch, Katherine stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, examining her reflection. The borrowed dress from Lily had been altered to fit her smaller frame, and her hair was neatly arranged in a practical but becoming style. Her cheeks, once pale from shock and pain, now held a healthy glow from days spent in the fresh air. Lily appeared in the doorway. "You look ready to conquer the banking world of New Hope," she declared approvingly. Katherine turned from the mirror with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks to you and Lucas, I have that chance." Lily studied her for a moment. "You know, New Hope is only an hour's ride from here. We could see each other often." "I'd like that," Katherine replied sincerely. "And I suspect my brother would like it even more," Lily added with a knowing look. "He's been like a lovesick calf since you arrived, trying to hide it, of course, but I've known him his whole life." Heat rushed to Katherine's cheeks. "Lily, oh, don't worry, I'm not pushing," Lily assured her. "Just making an observation. Lucas respects your independence too much to speak his mind before you're settled in New Hope. That's the kind of man he is, puts others' needs before his own." Before Katherine could respond, the sound of a wagon pulling up outside announced that it was time to depart. Lucas had insisted on driving her to New Hope himself to introduce her properly to Mr. Reynolds and Mrs. Chen. The goodbye with Lily was emotional, with promises of visits exchanged and a basket of food pressed into Katherine's hands for the journey. As Lucas helped Katherine into the wagon, his hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary, his eyes conveying what remained unspoken between them. The journey to New Hope took them through rolling hills covered in spring wildflowers, past scattered homesteads and grazing cattle. Lucas pointed out landmarks along the way: the creek where he'd caught his first fish as a boy, the stand of oak trees where wild turkeys nested, the distant mountains that marked the edge of Lambert grazing land. "I never asked how large your ranch is," Katherine commented, enjoying the gentle sway of the wagon and Lucas's companionable presence beside her. 800 acres, he replied. "Not the largest in the county, but good land with reliable water. My father chose it carefully, traded 10 years of work as a foreman for the down payment. You're fortunate to have such a legacy." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "I am, though sometimes I think about how isolated it is, especially for Lily. She deserves more than the company of her brother and 3 ranch hands." "She seems content," Katherine observed. "Content, yes, but fulfilled," Lucas shrugged. "I worry she's sacrificing too much, staying there because she thinks I need her." "Do you need her, I mean?" Lucas considered this as he guided the horses around a bend in the road. "I need her companionship, her good sense, her laughter, but I don't need her to put her own dreams aside for the ranch. I've told her so, but she's stubborn as they come." "It sounds like a family trait," Katherine teased gently. Lucas's laugh was warm and genuine. "Guilty as charged." As they crested a small rise, the town of New Hope came into view in the valley below. It was smaller than Brownsville, but more orderly, with wide streets laid out in a grid pattern and buildings constructed of a mix of wood and the local limestone. A white church spire rose above the other structures, and the newly built bank stood prominently at the town's center, its brick facade gleaming in the midday sun. "What do you think?" Lucas asked, watching her reaction. "It looks hopeful," Katherine replied, unable to find a better word. As they drove down the main street, Katherine observed the residents going about their business, women shopping, children playing, men gathered in conversation outside the general store. It seemed peaceful, ordinary in the best possible way. Lucas stopped the wagon in front of an impressive 2-story building with First Bank of New Hope painted in gold letters across its front window. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand to help her down. Katherine took a deep breath, smoothing her skirt. "Ready." Mr. Reynolds proved to be a portly, energetic man in his 50s, with spectacles perched on his nose and ink stains on his fingers. He greeted them warmly, ushering them into his office at the rear of the bank. "Mr. Lambert has spoken very highly of your abilities, Miss Ainsworth," he began once they were seated. "Though I must admit, I've never employed a female bookkeeper before." "I understand your hesitation," Katherine replied confidently. "Perhaps I could demonstrate my skills." "I see you have ledgers there that appear to need balancing." Impressed by her directness, Mr. Reynolds pushed a leather-bound book across his desk. "By all means." For the next 20 minutes, Katherine worked through the entries with quick efficiency, identifying 2 mathematical errors and suggesting an improved method for tracking loan payments. Lucas watched with undisguised pride as she explained her findings clearly and professionally. Mr. Reynolds removed his spectacles, polishing them thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Ainsworth, it seems Mr. Lambert's praise was, if anything, understated. When can you begin?" "I'm available immediately," she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Excellent. Shall we say tomorrow morning at 8? The salary is $40 per month, with half days on Saturdays and Sundays free." It was more than Katherine had earned at the mayor's office in Brownsville, and the prospect of regular days off was appealing. "That sounds very fair, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you for the opportunity." After finalizing the details, Lucas escorted Katherine to Mrs. Chen's dressmaking shop. The building was a narrow 2-story structure painted a cheerful yellow, with display windows showcasing fine dresses and children's clothing. Mrs. Chen herself was a surprise, a Chinese woman in her 40s with perfect English and a businesslike manner that Katherine immediately appreciated. She showed them to the room above her shop, a small but immaculate space with a bed, dresser, washstand, and small sitting area near the window that overlooked the main street. "Rent is $8 monthly, includes use of kitchen downstairs after shop hours," Mrs. Chen explained. "No gentlemen visitors upstairs, no loud noises after 9, and I expect help shoveling snow in winter." "The terms are perfectly acceptable," Katherine assured her. "It's a lovely room." After Mrs. Chen returned downstairs, Katherine moved to the window, looking out at what would be her new home. "It's really happening," she murmured, half to herself. Lucas came to stand beside her, careful to maintain a proper distance now that they were in town. "Are you pleased?" "More than pleased," Katherine replied, turning to face him. "I'm grateful." "Without your help, you would have found your way," Lucas interrupted gently. "You're the strongest person I've met in a long time, Katherine Ainsworth." There was something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster, a warmth and admiration that stirred feelings she had thought herself incapable of after years of guarding her independence. "Will you come back to visit?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could reconsider. "Try and stop me," Lucas replied with a smile. "I have business in town at least once a week, and Lily would never forgive me if I didn't bring you out to the ranch for Sunday dinner whenever you're free." Relief flooded through her. "I'd like that very much." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Lucas cleared his throat. "I should bring your things up from the wagon, and then I suppose I should start back if I want to reach the ranch before dark." Katherine nodded, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Of course." After bringing up her father's satchel and the few items she had accumulated during her stay at the ranch, Lucas lingered at the door, hat in hand. "I'll check in on you next week, if that's all right." "I would appreciate that," Katherine replied, wishing she could find words for the emotions tangling in her chest. Lucas hesitated, then reached out to take her hand, pressing it briefly between both of his. "Take care of yourself, Katherine." And then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. Katherine moved to the window, watching as he climbed into the wagon and with one last glance up at her window, drove away down the street. That night, in her new room with its unfamiliar sounds and shadows, Katherine found sleep elusive. She thought of the Lambert Ranch with its peaceful rhythms, of Lily's infectious laugh, and most of all of Lucas, his gentle strength, his unwavering respect, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. For the first time in years, Katherine allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than just independence and work. It was a frightening prospect, opening herself to the possibility of connection, of vulnerability. Yet as she finally drifted towards sleep, she realized that the fear was accompanied by something else: hope. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Katherine settled into her new life in New Hope. The work at the bank proved challenging but satisfying, with Mr. Reynolds quickly coming to rely on her organizational skills and attention to detail. To her surprise, most of the bank's customers accepted her presence with minimal fuss, though there were occasional raised eyebrows and muttered comments about women's proper place. Mrs. Chen proved to be an ideal landlady, respectful of Katherine's privacy, yet companionable during the shared evening meals in the small kitchen behind the dress shop. The Chinese woman had her own remarkable story, having come to America as a young bride, then losing her husband to a mining accident in California before making her way to Texas with nothing but her sewing skills to sustain her. Men think women fragile like porcelain doll, Mrs. Chen remarked one evening as they shared a pot of tea. But women bend like bamboo in storm while men break like oak. Katherine found wisdom in these conversations, drawing strength from the older woman's resilience and pragmatism. True to his word, Lucas visited the following week, arriving at the bank just as Katherine was finishing for the day. The sight of him standing awkwardly in the lobby, hat in hand and a bunch of wildflowers poking out of his saddlebag, sent a surge of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the Texas heat. "I thought perhaps you might join me for supper at the hotel restaurant," he suggested after greeting her. "If you don't have other plans, that is." Katherine accepted eagerly, and they enjoyed a pleasant meal, exchanging news and observations about their respective weeks. Lucas mentioned that Lily had begun corresponding with a publisher in St. Louis who had expressed interest in her botanical drawings, prompted by Katherine's encouragement before she left. "She's different since you came into our lives," Lucas remarked. "More willing to pursue her own interests beyond the ranch. I think you've been a good influence." "I'm glad," Katherine replied sincerely. "She's so talented it would be a shame for the world to be deprived of her knowledge." As the weeks passed, these visits became a regular occurrence. Sometimes Lucas would bring news or letters from Lily. Sometimes small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, preserves Lily had made, or simply flowers gathered along the way. Each visit deepened the connection between them, building on the foundation of mutual respect established during her recovery at the ranch. On Sundays, when the bank was closed, Lucas would arrive with the wagon to take Katherine to the Lambert Ranch for the day. These became the highlights of her week hours spent helping Lily in her garden, enjoying family-style meals with the ranch hands, and taking long walks with Lucas in the peaceful countryside. During one such Sunday visit in late June, nearly 2 months after Katherine had moved to New Hope, Lucas suggested they ride to a special spot on the property he wanted to show her. With Katherine mounted on Lily's gentle mare, they set off through rolling pastureland dotted with grazing cattle. "Where are we going?" Katherine asked as they crested a hill, the ranch house now a distant speck behind them. "Patience," Lucas replied with a mysterious smile. "It's just beyond that stand of trees." They rode in companionable silence until they reached the trees, where Lucas dismounted and helped Katherine down from her horse. Leading her through the cool shade of the oak grove, he finally brought her to the edge of a small, hidden meadow carpeted with wildflowers in every imaginable color. A stream bubbled along one edge, and the afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light. "Oh, Lucas," Katherine breathed, taking in the scene. "It's like something from a painting." "My mother called it Heaven's Garden," he said, watching her reaction with pleasure. "She found it the first year they bought the land, said it was God's way of confirming they'd made the right choice." He spread a blanket he'd brought in his saddlebag beneath the shade of an oak at the meadow's edge. "I thought we might rest here a while." They sat side by side, watching butterflies dance among the flowers while birds called from the trees around them. Katherine felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since childhood, a rightness that made her chest ache with its perfection. "I've been thinking," Lucas said after a time, his voice breaking the gentle silence. About new hope about the future. Katherine turned to look at him, struck by the serious note in his tone. What about it? Lucas plucked a blade of grass, rolling it between his fingers as he gathered his thoughts. The town's growing. They'll need more than just a bank soon. They'll need someone looking out for the community's interests, making sure growth happens the right way. You sound like you've given this considerable thought, he nodded. I have. I've been talking with some of the business owners and they've asked me to consider running for town council next year. Katherine's eyes widened in surprise. Lucas, that's wonderful. You'd be perfect for such a position. You think so? There was genuine question in his voice, a vulnerability that touched her. I know so, she replied firmly. You have integrity, fairness, and vision, exactly what a growing town needs. Lucas looked at her then, his expression open and unguarded. Your opinion means a great deal to me, Katherine, more than you know. Something shifted between them in that moment, a barrier falling away. Katherine became acutely aware of his proximity, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way the dappled sunlight played across his features. Katherine, he said softly, her name like a prayer on his lips. I need to tell you something, and I hope you won't think me too forward. Her heart quickened. Yes, these past months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness, he paused, taking a deep breath. I've never met anyone like you, and I find myself thinking of you constantly, wondering what you're doing, hoping you're happy in New Hope. Katherine couldn't look away from the intensity in his eyes. I am happy there, she said truthfully. Happier than I expected to be. Good, he replied. That's good, but I want to ask, he stopped again, seeming to struggle for words. Would you consider allowing me to court you properly? I understand if it's too soon, or if your career takes precedence. Katherine silenced him by placing her hand gently over his. Lucas, she said, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions in her chest. I would like that very much. The smile that illuminated his face was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward. Katherine closed the remaining distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss as gentle as it was profound, a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, Lucas kept his forehead pressed against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day you stood up to Hargrove in the town square, he confessed. Even bruised and defeated, you had more dignity and courage than anyone I'd ever seen. Katherine pulled back slightly, surprised. You were there, before the punishment, Lucas nodded, his expression darkening at the memory. I was delivering some papers to the land office when I heard the commotion. I saw you arguing your case, showing those ledgers, refusing to recant even when threatened. It was the bravest thing I'd ever witnessed. Not brave, Katherine corrected gently. Just stubborn and perhaps foolish. No, Lucas insisted, not foolish, never that. You stood for truth when it would have been easier to remain silent. How could I not admire such courage? They stayed in the meadow until the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, talking, sharing stories from their pasts, and occasionally falling into comfortable silences. When they finally returned to the ranch house, Lily took one look at their clasped hands and broke into a wide grin. Well, it's about time, she declared, making both of them blush. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the root cellar together. The courtship that followed was conducted with propriety but genuine affection. In New Hope, Lucas would take Katherine to church socials, community picnics, and occasional suppers at the hotel. In private moments, they shared dreams and fears, building a foundation of trust that grew stronger with each passing week. Katherine flourished at the bank, earning a raise after just 3 months when Mr. Reynolds recognized that her efficient systems had increased their business considerably. She made friends among the townspeople, particularly a schoolteacher named Miss Abernathy who shared her love of literature and progressive ideas about women's education. By the time autumn painted the Texas landscape in golds and russets, Katherine had become an integral part of New Hope's community. She helped organize a harvest festival, volunteered to teach basic accounting to interested women at the church on Wednesday evenings, and even wrote occasional articles for the New Hope Chronicle about financial matters relevant to the growing town. Lucas, meanwhile, had formally announced his candidacy for the town council, with the election scheduled for the following spring. He divided his time between managing the ranch and building connections in town, earning respect for his fair-minded approach to the issues facing the community. On a crisp November evening, nearly 6 months after Katherine had first arrived at the Lambert Ranch, Lucas invited her to ride with him to their special meadow. Though the wildflowers had faded, the spot retained its peaceful beauty, the stream reflecting the late afternoon sunlight as it danced over smooth stones. Lucas seemed uncharacteristically nervous as he helped Katherine spread the blanket beneath their favorite oak tree. He kept reaching into his pocket, then stopping himself until Katherine finally laughed and asked, "What has you so fidgety today?" Instead of answering, Lucas took both her hands in his and guided her to sit on the blanket facing him. His expression was solemn yet filled with tenderness as he looked into her eyes. "Katherine Ainsworth," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face, "when you came into my life, I was content but incomplete. I had my ranch, my sister, a purpose, but I didn't realize what was missing until I met you." Katherine's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. "You've shown me what true courage looks like," Lucas continued. "You've brought laughter and light not just to me, but to everyone around you. You've created a place for yourself in this community through nothing but your own merit and determination." He paused, swallowing hard. "And in the process, you've captured my heart entirely." Reaching into his pocket, Lucas withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring with a modest diamond flanked by 2 small sapphires. "This was my mother's," he explained softly, "and her mother's before that." Katherine's eyes filled with tears as Lucas shifted to one knee before her, still holding her left hand in his. "I love you, Katherine. I love your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. I love the way you stand up for what's right, the way you see possibilities where others see obstacles. I want to build a life with you, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared dreams." He took a deep breath. "Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Katherine couldn't speak past the emotion tightening her throat. This man before her had shown her that love didn't have to mean sacrifice or submission, that it could be a source of strength rather than limitation. With him, she didn't have to choose between independence and connection. He valued both her autonomy and her heart. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Lucas, I will marry you." Joy illuminated his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, the setting sun bathed them in golden light, a blessing on the covenant they had just made. "I have one condition," Katherine said as Lucas helped her to her feet, his eyebrows rose in question. "Name it." "I want to continue working at the bank, at least until we have children. My career is important to me." Relief and love mingled in Lucas's expression. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Your work is part of who you are. Why would I ask you to give that up?" Katherine's heart swelled with gratitude for this man who truly saw her, who valued her mind as much as her heart. "I love you, Lucas Lambert," she said simply. "And I love you, Katherine Ainsworth, soon to be Lambert," he replied, sealing the words with another kiss. They returned to the ranch house hand in hand, where Lily was waiting on the porch as if she'd known exactly what this day would bring. Her joyful embrace enveloped them both, and soon the house was filled with celebration as the ranch hands joined in with congratulations and impromptu music, Tomas on his guitar, Hank playing a harmonica, and George keeping rhythm on an upturned bucket. As Katherine stood in the circle of Lucas's arm, watching Lily dance with Tomas to the lively tune, she felt a sense of homecoming deeper than any she had known before. Here, surrounded by people who valued truth and kindness, she had found not just healing but belonging. The wedding took place the following spring, just 2 weeks after Lucas won his seat on the town council. The ceremony was held in New Hope's white-steepled church, with Lily as Catherine's maid of honor and Mr. Reynolds giving the bride away. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with ranchers from the surrounding countryside who had come to respect Lucas's fair dealings and straight talk. Catherine wore a gown of ivory satin that Mrs. Chen had insisted on making as her wedding gift, with delicate embroidery adorning the bodice and sleeves. Lily had woven wildflowers from heaven's garden into a crown for Catherine's hair, and Lucas couldn't take his eyes off his bride as she walked down the aisle toward him. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to honor each other's strengths, to support each other's dreams, to face life's challenges as equal partners. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was a testament to how far they had come from that first meeting beside a dusty road outside Brownsville. The reception was held at the Lambert Ranch, with tables set up in the yard under strings of lanterns. There was music and dancing, abundant food prepared by women from the church, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. As twilight deepened into night, Catherine found herself swept into yet another dance with her new husband, his arms strong and sure around her waist. "Are you happy, Mrs. Lambert?" Lucas asked, his voice low and intimate despite the festivities surrounding them. Catherine looked up at him, at the face that had become as dear to her as her own reflection. "Completely," she replied. "Are you?" "Beyond words," he assured her, pulling her closer as they swayed to the music. "Though I do have some news that might add to our happiness." Curiosity piqued, Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Oh," Lucas leaned down to speak directly into her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Mr. Hollister, the editor who was run out of Brownsville after publishing your article, he's purchased the New Hope Chronicle, arrived last week while you were busy with wedding preparations." Catherine pulled back in surprise. "Truly." "But how?" He landed on his feet in Austin, built up another paper there. When he heard about New Hope growing, he decided it was time for a change of scenery. Lucas's eyes twinkled with satisfaction. "And he specifically asked if you might consider writing a regular column on financial matters for the paper. Said he'd never met a woman with such a clear head for numbers and words combined." Delight bubbled up inside Catherine at this unexpected turn of events. "I'd love to. As long as it wouldn't interfere with my work at the bank, of course." "Mr. Reynolds already approved the idea," Lucas assured her. "Said it would only enhance the bank's reputation to have their bookkeeper recognized as a local authority." Catherine shook her head in wonder. "Sometimes life's paths lead us to unexpected destinations, don't they?" "Indeed they do," Lucas agreed, his gaze warm with love. "And I couldn't be more grateful that your path led to me." As the celebration continued around them, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain and humiliation she had suffered in Brownsville had seemed like an ending at the time, but it had actually been a beginning, the first step toward a life richer and more fulfilling than she could have imagined. In the months that followed, the newlyweds settled into a rhythm that honored both their individual pursuits and their shared life. Catherine continued her work at the bank while adding the newspaper column to her responsibilities. Lucas divided his time between the ranch and his duties on the town council, where his practical approach to governance quickly earned him respect even among those who had initially opposed his election. They made their home at the Lambert Ranch, with Lily insisting on moving into the smaller cabin that had once housed the original homesteaders, giving the main house to the newlyweds. "I've been wanting my own space for years," she declared when they protested. "Besides, I can hear the coyotes better from there. They inspire my drawings." The truth was that Lily thrived with this new arrangement. Her correspondence with the St. Louis publisher had resulted in a contract for a book of botanical illustrations, and she dedicated her newfound privacy to this project with passionate focus. The three adults still shared most evening meals, maintaining the close family bonds that had been established. New Hope continued to grow, with the promised railroad spur completed by the end of the year. The increased connection to larger markets benefited both the town merchants and the surrounding ranches, bringing prosperity that Lucas worked to ensure was distributed equitably through fair taxation and investment in community resources. Catherine's financial column in the Chronicle became one of the paper's most popular features, offering practical advice that benefited households and businesses alike. Mr. Hollister eventually persuaded her to expand her writing to include commentary on local governance and development, giving her a platform to advocate for sensible growth policies and equal educational opportunities for all the town's children. In the spring following their first anniversary, Katherine discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought joy not only to Lucas and herself, but to the entire extended family they had built around them: Lily, the ranch hands, Mrs. Chen, and their growing circle of friends in New Hope. "I'll need to train someone to take over my duties at the bank while I'm unable to work," Katherine mused one evening as she and Lucas sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the western sky. Lucas covered her hand with his, their matching gold bands catching the fading light. "Mr. Reynolds mentioned that Miss Abernathy's younger sister has quite a head for figures. Perhaps she would be interested in learning from you." Katherine smiled at this thoughtful solution. "That would be perfect. She's just finished school and was wondering about her prospects." "And after the baby comes?" Lucas asked carefully, knowing this was a delicate subject. "What are your thoughts?" Katherine appreciated his approach, not assuming, not dictating, but genuinely seeking her perspective. "I'd like to continue my column," she replied after consideration. "Perhaps reduce my hours at the bank initially, working from home when possible. As the child grows, I can adjust accordingly." Lucas nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "We'll make it work, whatever you decide. Between Lily and myself, there will always be someone to care for our child while you pursue your calling." As her pregnancy progressed, Katherine's appreciation for the partnership she and Lucas had built only deepened. He attended to her needs without infantilizing her, respected her continuing work while ensuring she didn't overtax herself, and shared in the preparations for their child's arrival with infectious enthusiasm. On a crisp December morning, after a night of labor supported by Lucas, Lily, and the town's doctor, Katherine gave birth to a healthy son they named Thomas James Lambert, Thomas for Lucas's father, and James for Katherine's. The infant had Lucas's brown hair and Katherine's determined chin, a perfect blending of their features that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "He's magnificent," Lucas whispered, cradling his son with careful hands that trembled slightly with emotion, just like his mother. In the years that followed, the Lambert family continued to grow and thrive. Katherine gradually resumed her work at the bank and her writing for the Chronicle, balancing these responsibilities with motherhood in a way that brought her deep fulfillment. Lucas was eventually elected mayor of New Hope, a position he approached with the same integrity and thoughtfulness he brought to everything in his life. Thomas was joined by a sister, Lillian Faith, 2 years later, and eventually by another brother, Michael, completing their family. The children grew up surrounded by love and encouragement, learning from both parents the value of truth, courage, and compassion. Lily's botanical book was published to critical acclaim, leading to commissions for similar works focused on other regions. She traveled periodically to gather specimens and conduct research, always returning to the Lambert Ranch with new stories and experiences to share with her niece and nephews. On warm summer evenings, the extended family would gather on the porch of the main house. Lucas and Katherine, their children, Lily, and often Mrs. Chen or other friends from town. As the stars emerged in the vast Texas sky, they would share stories, dreams, and reminiscences, building memories that would sustain them through life's inevitable challenges. One such evening, as the children played a game of tag in the yard under Lily's watchful eye, Lucas and Katherine sat side by side on the porch steps, his arm wrapped comfortably around her shoulders. "You ever think about Brownsville?" Lucas asked quietly. "About what happened there?" Katherine considered the question, watching her children's joyful movements in the gathering twilight. "Less often now," she admitted. "It's like a book I read long ago. I remember the story, but the emotions have faded." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Mayor Hargrove lost the last election, I heard." The new mayor reopened the investigation into the school funds. This news brought a small smile to Katherine's lips. "Justice comes eventually, it seems." "Indeed it does," Lucas agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple, "though sometimes by unexpected paths." Katherine turned to face him, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. The lines at the corners of his eyes deepened by years of laughter, the strong jaw now sporting flecks of gray in his beard. "If I hadn't been driven from Brownsville, I would never have found you," she said softly. "Never known this life we've built together. Sometimes I think it was the luckiest day of my life, though it didn't feel that way at the time." "For me as well," Lucas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "When I saw you on that road, wounded but unbowed, I had no idea that moment would change everything." Katherine leaned into his embrace, content in the knowledge that they had faced the world together and would continue to do so for all the years to come. From the pain of public humiliation, she had found her way to this man who spoke truth with kindness, who had helped her heal while never asking her to be less than she was. As darkness settled fully over the Lambert ranch, the stars overhead bearing witness to lives well lived and love hard won, Katherine offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had led her home to this place, to these people, to the fullness of her own potential. In Lucas's arms, surrounded by the family they had created together, she had found not just healing but a life richer and more meaningful than she had ever dared to dream. And when Lucas whispered, "I love you, Katherine Lambert," his voice as gentle as it had been on that first day by the roadside, she answered with the truth that had become the cornerstone of her existence. "And I love you today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left." The soft-spoken cowboy who had once saved her had become the partner with whom she had saved herself, building a life where truth was honored, courage rewarded, and love expressed not in grand gestures but in the quiet, constant support that had allowed them both to become their best selves. It was a legacy they would pass to their children, and through them, to generations yet to come, the enduring power of truth spoken with kindness, and of hearts that find in each other not limitation, but endless possibility.